It started with someone posting too early. One of those quick, nervous uploads that appears before the person realizes they should have waited, checked, zoomed, anything. A blurry street shot outside a small venue in Seoul. Nothing dramatic, nothing staged. Just pavement, a dim sidewalk lamp, a few people waiting for rides. And then, the shape that made everyone stop scrolling. Jimin, hood up but unmistakable, standing beside a girl who wasn't staff, wasn't a bodyguard, wasn't anyone the fandom recognized. They weren't speaking. They weren't touching. They weren't even looking at each other, but they were waiting in parallel. Same stretch of wall, same pocket of silence, same hesitant stillness that looked too synchronized to be random. The fan who posted the photo deleted it within 2 minutes, which only made things worse. Screenshots hit Twitter before anyone could breathe. At first, the comments were almost polite. Is he really with someone? Could be a stranger. Maybe the angle is weird. But the issue wasn't the girl herself. It was the positioning, the distance, the way their shadows overlapped under the streetlight, just enough to suggest familiarity and not enough to confirm anything. Some users swore there was a pause before the picture was taken, like Jimin had turned his head a little, as if aware someone was watching. Others denied that, saying he didn't move at all, that the stillness was what made it unsettling. Then came the first real mistake. A fan account reposted the photo with a circle drawn around the girl, captioning it, "Who is she?" before deleting the post 30 seconds later when replies exploded. Too fast, too impulsive, too loud. That one moment jolted the timeline into chaos. Suddenly, people were combing through street layouts, checking which back door the venue used, which side artists usually exited from. He never waits outside, someone said. He always leaves through the van entrance. Another insisted they saw her earlier, near the merch booth, standing alone, looking at her phone. No one could confirm that. The timestamps didn't match. The lighting didn't match. But the anxious repetition of the claim made it spread. The street looked ordinary, but the silence in the photo wasn't. It wasn't a rushed exit. It wasn't a crowd. It was two people waiting in a way that shouldn't have felt loaded, yet somehow did. Too quiet, too aligned, too aware. And the longer fans stared at that low-quality image, the more the question shifted from, who is she? To, why was he standing there at all? The venue had 3 exits. He chose the one with no staff around, no van pulled up, no visible reason to linger. And that choice, unexplained, uncontextualized, was what cracked the timeline open. Soon, people weren't arguing about the girl. They were arguing about that silence, that street, that impossible-to-place moment between leaving and leaving with someone. A moment that shouldn't have meant anything, yet somehow refused to mean nothing. By morning, the entire conversation had drifted away from the blurry photo itself and toward the strange, uncomfortable details surrounding it. Details that didn't quite line up, yet wouldn't fall apart either. A new clip surfaced, only 6 seconds long, filmed from across the street. Jimin standing exactly where the earlier photo placed him, hands in his pockets. The girl beside him with her head slightly lowered. No movement, no urgency. Just the kind of shared waiting that felt too calm for a coincidence. The clip's uploader insisted they hadn't meant to catch anything, that they were recording traffic, or the venue's sign, or just testing the camera, depending on which deleted comment you believed. But their panic was obvious. The video vanished in under a minute, replaced by a blank account. Too late. Mirrors, re-uploads, slowed-down versions were everywhere within an hour. People began arguing over micro-gestures. Did Jimin shift his weight toward her, or away? Did she glance up at him at the 2-second mark, or was it just the angle? Someone tried to debunk the entire thing by posting a layout of the block, claiming the perspective couldn't be real because no one stands on that side of the entrance unless they're waiting for someone. That comment thread turned into a battlefield. Others countered that the street lamp visible in the clip does exist. There are fan photos of it from last year. But then someone else pointed out that the lamp flickers on camera, which means the timestamp might be off. Every attempt to clarify made the whole thing murkier. A moderator from a large fan community tried to calm people down with a post saying, "This could be anything. Don't jump to conclusions." But screenshots quickly circulated, claiming that the same mod had been in the Discord channel where the first image leaked. People began whispering about attempts to bury the early posts, accusations of deletion, of pressure, of protecting the wrong narrative. Nobody could prove anything, but the suspicion stuck. Meanwhile, users started analyzing the girl's silhouette, her coat length, her posture, even her stance, only for others to scold them for overreaching, creating another wave of deleted tweets and defensive explanations. Through all of this, the most unsettling question remained unresolved. If this was nothing, why did it look so intentional? Why was Jimin waiting outside instead of heading straight to a car? Why that door? Why that minute of absolute stillness? And the more people tried to dismiss it as coincidence, the more that silence in the footage began to feel like the loudest part. By early afternoon, the narrative split into so many versions that no one could tell which parts were real and which were echoes of someone else's speculation. A user claimed they'd passed by the venue an hour before the sighting and noticed a girl in a similar coat leaning against the far wall, scrolling through her phone. Alone, unbothered, seemingly waiting for someone. Another insisted she'd been inside during the sound check, sitting near the back with a staff lanyard that no one else had seen before or since. Neither story could be verified. Both spread anyway. Then came the photo that pushed the fandom from confusion into full-blown tension. A reflection captured accidentally in the window of a convenience store across the street. It showed two silhouettes, one clearly Jimin's, the other matching the girl's height and posture. Not touching, not speaking, but angled just enough toward each other that people began arguing whether they were standing closer than in the original clip. Some swore the reflection made the gap between them look smaller. Others argued reflections distort distance, especially at night. The longer the debate went on, the less anyone cared about the truth. It became about the feeling that something here wasn't adding up. A translator account accidentally worsened things by posting, then immediately deleting a caption that read, "They look like they were leaving together." No context, no source, no explanation. Screenshots spread instantly. Some fans begged others not to share it, saying it was irresponsible, but the attempt to control the narrative only made it grow heavier, stickier. People began comparing the lighting in the reflection to old fan cams, trying to match brightness levels to figure out if Jimin and the girl were actually facing one another or just happened to be caught mid-turn. Discord chats leaked fragments of conversations, claims that someone had seen the girl step forward first, or that Jimin had spoken quietly before the camera caught him. None of it could be confirmed, but every deleted message was treated like evidence of something bigger. And somehow, the more rational explanations were offered. Maybe they were waiting for separate rides. Maybe she was just a fan who froze. The less convincing they felt. Not because the theories were impossible, but because no one could explain that specific silence, that shared stillness, that odd, synchronized moment on the sidewalk that didn't look staged, but didn't look accidental either. It hovered in the middle, too ambiguous to claim, too pointed to ignore. And by now, the fandom wasn't even asking who the girl was anymore. They were asking what they had seen, and why the moment refused to fit into any version that made sense. By evening, the discussion wasn't just scattered. It was malfunctioning, looping over itself as fans tried to stitch together a timeline that refused to behave. A new angle surfaced from someone who claimed they were simply filming the street for a vlog. A brief, shaky glimpse of Jimin standing exactly where every other clip placed him. But this time, the girl was a half step closer, as if she'd shifted. Or he had. The uploader insisted the movement happened before they pressed record, but that tiny shift became the centerpiece of 100 arguments. Some fans said the gap between them looked smaller, almost comfortable. Others said the camera lens was wide angle, making everything warp. Someone even overlaid grid lines and insisted their shoulders were angled toward one another, at an impossible coincidence. The replies spiraled fast. People began posting diagrams of the sidewalk, speculating about where the curb forced them to stand, arguing about whether the lamppost acted as a visual divider or if the shadow made them seem nearer than they were. One account claimed a staff member had briefly stepped outside earlier and seemed to hesitate after seeing Jimin, as if unsure whether to interrupt. That comment vanished without explanation, and the disappearance only made it spread harder in screenshots. Then came the worst moment of the day. A fan with a large following posted a thread saying, "I don't think he was alone," then locked their account within minutes, leading everyone to suspect they'd seen something they weren't supposed to. Theories flooded in, pressure from management, guilt over stirring the pot. Or maybe they'd realized they misinterpreted the scene. No one knew. Everyone pretended they did. Attempts to calm the conversation backfired. One mod requested that people stop inventing stories, but the phrasing felt patronizing and set off another wave of distrust. TikToks dissected the distance between Jimin's shoes and the curb. Twitter threads compared his posture to past sightings where he'd kept more distance from fans. The strangest part was how none of this had anything to do with romance. No one was pushing that angle. The discomfort came from something subtler. The idea that Jimin, who rarely lingered outside venues and who moved with practiced efficiency, was suddenly waiting. Not rushing, not shielded, just existing next to someone in a moment that felt private, precisely because nothing was happening. A silence that couldn't be explained, a stillness that wouldn't dissolve, and every attempt to rationalize it only made the uncertainty worse. By nightfall, The conversation had reached the point where no one was arguing about facts anymore. Because there were no facts left. Only interpretations stacked on top of interpretations, each one contradicting the last. Another clip surfaced, this one filmed from inside a passing taxi, catching only a fraction of the scene. Jimin standing under the street lamp, the girl slightly turned away, a car approaching, then slowing, then leaving without stopping. The taxi video didn't show who the car was for, or whether it was even related, but people immediately tried to match the headlights to known van models, insisting the vehicle looked too familiar or too deliberate. A few fans said the girl lifted her phone for a second, as if checking a message or calling someone, but the motion was impossible to confirm, just a blur of reflected light on the screen. Some argued the phone belonged to someone else off-frame. Others said it was just the taxi window glare. Every attempt to analyze the footage created new inconsistencies. The timing didn't match earlier posts, the angles felt off, the lighting looked different by minutes. Even the weather became a point of contention. Someone claimed the pavement looked damp in the taxi clip, but dry in the original photo. That tiny detail spawned a thread, insisting the videos weren't from the same moment at all, only for another user to argue that the street dries unevenly near the venue's slope. It stopped being about the girl. It stopped being about Jimin. It became about a moment the fandom couldn't categorize, a stillness they couldn't file under normal or suspicious. A few large accounts tried to shift attention elsewhere, posting unrelated updates, fan cams, edits. But the silence around the venue incident only made people cling harder to the fragments they already had. Nobody claimed anything outright. Nobody had proof. Nobody even agreed on what they were looking at anymore. Yet the discussion kept growing, echoing into communities that hadn't seen the original post. Someone quoted the deleted thread as evidence. Another reposted an out-of-context screenshot asking, "Why was he there for so long?" Within hours, alternate versions of the story replaced the real ones, and the real ones were already too fractured to salvage. The fandom reached that collective realization all at once. The moment when a rumor stops being a rumor and becomes something self-sustaining. Too spread out to undo, too shared to retract. No statements came, no clarifications. The timeline sat suspended in that unresolved tension. A street, a lamp, a pause, a girl, and Jimin standing just close enough to notice, just far enough to deny, leaving fans with a single question no one could answer without contradicting themselves. If it meant nothing, why did it feel like something everyone was suddenly afraid to admit they saw?